Hello, my name is Mariatta, and I'm joining you today virtually from Vancouver, Canada. Thank you so much for joining and watching my talk today. Most of you probably know that I am a Python core developer. If you're not sure what it means, I do have a talk titled What is a Python core developer, which I gave it at PyCon US a couple years ago, so please look that up on YouTube. The short summary is that if you have a pull request to Python programming language, I can merge it for you. Basically, I'm one of the maintainers of one of the most popular programming language. And for my contributions to Python, I've received recognitions such as the Python Software Foundation Community Service Award. I'm also a PSF Fellow member. I've been nominated twice for the Google Open Source Peer Bonus Program. And I've been featured on GitHub as one of the maintainers for GitHub Sponsors Program, the README project, and recently when GitHub announced the new Mars helicopter badge, somehow they decided to use my GitHub profile to be featured. The thing is, I'm new at this. I've really only started contributing to open source quite recently. My first ever contribution to open source was 2016, and that was 5 years ago. So I wasn't born doing this. I haven't been a long time maintainer of open source. But since then, I've continued to actively contribute to lots of projects, and somehow I ended up with being given commit rights to other people's open source projects. And all of a sudden, I felt like I have a set of new responsibilities, and I wasn't fully prepared for it all. So in this talk, I want to share my journey, how I got here. I want to share what it's like as a brand new open source maintainer. I want to share some of the mistakes that I've made, and additionally why I've continued in this path. What I hope by sharing my story, whether you're an aspiring contributor or an experienced maintainer, I hope you can do it much better than me. So how did this happen? People are asking like how to get started contributing. Do I have any tips or secrets to share on how this works? And I'm glad to hear your enthusiasm into getting to open source. But really for me, like how did it happen? I don't know. It happened suddenly. One day I was just making my first ever pull request to open source, and by the end of the year I got commit rights to a couple projects, and shortly after that I got the commit to C Python. I don't know how it happened. It happens suddenly. And since then, I've kept it up, and now I'm a member of various open source projects. But I think the real question is not how did it happen, but why? What motivated me into starting to contribute to open source? What drove me into this? I've been a long time user to Python, so why did all of a sudden I became inspired to start contributing and to give back to the community? This story began in 2015 when I attended PyCon in Montreal. It was my first ever PyCon, and I went to attend Guido van Rossum's keynote. So in his keynote, he talked about how in the Python core team, there was no women at all at that time. He had just attended Python Language Summit. It was a room of 50 men, no women at all. And then he realized this is a problem, and he was offering to help mentor women into contributing to Python. When I heard this fact, I was shocked. Like it didn't make sense. It felt wrong. Like how did it happen? But back then I didn't really do anything about it. At that time I was feeling curious, like how did this happen? But at the same time, I didn't think it was my problem. It was Python's problem, not mine. I felt like I'm just a user. I didn't think like there was anything I could do about it. So a year later, I went back to PyCon, and I was hoping to hear like who are the new Python core developers, the new women Python core developers. But instead, Guido admitted that there was still no women in the team, and he renewed his offer that he's willing to mentor even more women. And at that time, that's when it really hit me that there is this problem. There is a barrier that I didn't realize. There is a certain barrier in the Python open source community that somehow for 20 some years all of the core developers have all been men. So there's a diversity problem, and if I thought that it's not my problem before, this time I realized for myself that this is a problem I care a lot about and I wanted to do something about it. I didn't know what to even do about it. I mean, I could complain. I could just say, "Hey, you Python, you have diversity problem and you gotta fix it somehow." But I think pointing fingers was not productive, so I thought maybe I'll give this a try. Let's see what it's all about. Maybe I can contribute to open source. So I wrote email to Guido van Rossum and asked for mentorship. I felt really lucky that he actually replied, so I asked for advice. These are some of the early advice to me that he gave. First, he suggested that focus on modules that I found interesting. Go check out the repository, check out the contributing guide, and if I have trouble following the guide, if the documentation was not clear, then go help with the documentation. He also suggested go check out the bug tracker and look at issues. So the thing is, initially I didn't really find the CPython project too interesting. I followed the advice, I subscribed to the bug tracker, but nothing made sense to me. I just didn't feel like I have anything to contribute to. I didn't feel like I could help with anything at all. So I started thinking maybe if I couldn't contribute to Python, that's okay. Maybe I should start contribute to some other projects. So that's when I started looking into other projects like the python.org project. I thought it would be better if it's a project where I have some familiarity, where instead of trying to learn an entirely new code base, I could just make use of existing skills and knowledge that I already have. So the python.org project is an open source and it's built with Django, something at that time I was already familiar with. I was already experienced using Django library. So when I checked out the python.org code base, unlike the CPython code base, I felt more at home. I felt like, yes, this whole thing makes sense. So instead of feeling intimidated, I feel like I can contribute here. And whether I'm contributing to CPython or to any other projects, the first steps here is still the same. Go check out the repository, read the contributing guide. And if there's no contributing guide or if it's not complete, sometimes it happens, I would go ahead and help improve the documentation where it lacks. So now that I found a project that I could contribute to, in my mind, all I was thinking about, let's find an issue. Let's find an issue and write pull requests. The thing is, over time, I've learned that it's not about finding an issue, but I have to wait. Like I would have to watch the repository. Sometimes the thing I could help with hasn't been reported. So that's when I would start watching the repositories and subscribe to any updates that happen to it. And instead of fixating on only creating pull requests, I ended up starting to just review the existing open issues, reviewing all the existing pull requests. Even if it's not something I was already familiar with, I would start joining the discussion, ask questions. Sometimes I would just help verify whether the bug is still a bug or not. Sometimes it's been fixed, but the maintainers just forgot to close it. It happens. So I would go in and just tell the maintainers, hey, this is done. You just need to close it. um, this is how I was given the commit right to the Koala project and to the python.org website. It's not because I made hundreds of pull requests, but because I help with all other things as well. I help with triaging. And I think the other maintainers noticed my activities that way. And I think they saw that I cared about this project and they decided that they could trust me and give me the commit privileges. As I've gotten more active in the open source, I realized that becoming a contributor to the project is very much like starting a new job at a tech company. When you start a new job, the first few days, maybe even first few weeks, you'll be in onboarding and training sessions. Maybe there's someone more senior assigned to mentor you, give you a walkthrough of the code base and everything. Maybe you get assigned a small task. And then as you get more familiarized with the code base, you can start implementing big features on your own without help. Being a new contributor to any open source project is no different. It will take time for you to understand the code base and the workflow before you can start making a substantial feature or bug fix. The biggest difference is that there is no one assigned to mentor you or to walk you through the code base. There is no one who will assign you a ticket. You have to find a ticket for yourself. It's up to you. We maintainers don't know what are the things you want to do. You have to be asking questions. You need to give yourself a walkthrough of the code base. And instead of spending full time working, training to get familiarized with the project, you do this in whatever free time you have available. So it will take time to learn the code base. It will not be a day or two, it might not even be a week. CPython code base is like 30 years old. It's older than the legacy code base that you have in your company. And contributing to open source is more than simply find an issue and make code changes. It's also about becoming a part of the team. You gotta join the discussion forum. You gotta participate in all the discussions and all that. I think you shouldn't focus only on the open issues and only on writing codes and then ignore the rest of the community. You can't ignore the community. So, what happens the first time I became a maintainer? All of a sudden, I found myself receiving lots of emails because I got automatically added to all the repos. Even now, I'm still trying to figure out how to better manage my emails. It's getting better, but every few days I still found myself going to my inbox and look at the number of unread emails, and I'd close my eyes and just mark everything as read. So I'm sorry if I missed your email. If you are expecting an important reply to me, please send your email again. And as a contributor, often my involvement ends after I create that PR. What happens after? I didn't have to be to invest too much. It's whenever the maintainer have time, whenever the maintainer decided that they want to accept or reject my PR. Now, as a maintainer, I have to make that decision. I need to decide whether to merge. And for projects as large as CPython, we often have to think not just about the PR itself, but about the long-term maintenance burden of accepting the PR and how this change will impact the rest of Python users. Just because one person wanted it doesn't mean the rest of Python users want it too. And in addition to those, maintainers have to deal with things like code of conduct issues within their project, and they gotta moderate their communication channels, which is not easy. It's hard, and I don't think maintainers have to deal with this. I think they have enough responsibilities. I think COC committee moderators should be a separate body, separate org than the maintainers. But often this responsibility falls by default to the maintainers, because maintainers are the ones who own the project. They have the power to block or reject users. On top of all of those, one of the roles as a maintainer is to represent on behalf of the project, kind of becoming the spokesperson for the project. So I realized that I'm no longer speaking or acting for myself, but on behalf of the community. How I choose to act or to behave out there becomes a reflection of the community I belong to. And I've made mistakes. I was making some of the big decisions on my own, like I banned a user from a GitHub org, kind of big decision. Banning a person is a serious punishment. Like, it's basically you're rejecting them from your community. You're denying their involvement. So this is in one of the smaller communities, not Python, but I found someone made an inappropriate pull request. I found it disrespectful. I didn't want to trouble the rest of my community having to deal with this. So I went ahead and blocked the account without telling anybody. The thing is, it was a kind of decision I should not have made on my own. Like, I should have followed procedure of the code of conduct, let the committee know, or at least tell the other maintainers about this, so we can act as a group instead of just myself. But the biggest mistake I made was I was not managing my time wisely. People was asking, how do I manage my time and my life? I don't know. I do not have work-life volunteer balance. My life is not well balanced. I didn't have my priorities in the right order. There was time when, instead of being with my family on holidays, instead of being in my children's school performance, I was elsewhere in another county attending Python conference. I wasn't setting boundaries and rules for myself, and I was giving way too much time and energy to open source. In the end, I burned out and I went through mental health issues. But despite all that, despite all the troubles I've endured, I'm still here, I'm still actively contributing to open source, and I've continued saying yes to help people with their projects. Why am I doing this? Believe it or not, if I contribute too actively to a project to the point of being given commit rights, it's because I really do care a lot about it. Working openly in open source is a unique experience. It's a very different environment than working in a company. I get exposed to unique challenges not normally faced at work, and it's fun. I get to learn about new libraries, new things that people are building, and I get to play with those and use those way faster than at work. And I've gained a lot from the community. Not only that I'm continuously learning, but I got things like awards and recognitions, and those are fun, those are valuable to me. And I felt the sense of responsibility to pay it forward and to give it back. I attended Peter Wang's keynote at PyCon Germany the other year, and he was talking about open source community and said that in open source, the more you give, the more you get back, and I just find it resonates with me a lot. Another reason why I'm continuing is that almost immediately when I first started, I found acceptance from the community. When I emailed Guido and asked for help, I didn't need to prove anything to him. I didn't have to go through like on-site interviews and answer tons of questions in order to become a Python core developer. Somehow the community has accepted me, and for once in a long time, I feel like I belong. And that sense of belonging is important to me. So that's my story. Now that you've learned about my journey, I do have a few more words of advice for all of you aspiring open source contributors and maintainers. First of all, when you are extended invitation to collaborate and maintain a project, ask what is their expectation of you. Establish boundaries if there's any. Ask if there's anything you needed to do differently now that you got the commit privilege. I found that many open source projects that I've joined, they have really great contributing guide, which is a documentation aimed to help new contributors into contributing, but very few that I've seen that actually have maintenance guide. Like there's no new maintainer onboarding guide. So perhaps the thinking is that if someone has contributed long enough, maybe they know everything about it already. But maintaining a project is not the same as contributing. There are additional responsibilities and powers. So if your project don't yet have a maintenance guide, start one, and just you can start documenting as you learn, as you get onboarded. Projects should have succession plan in place. Maybe there's an unwritten expectation that maintainers would be around for a long time. I've only been around in open source for a few years, and in this short time, I have seen various maintainers come and go. Sometimes it's not even about maintainers who go completely retired, but people need time off from time to time. Maybe they're starting a family, starting a new job, they have family emergency, or they got burnout, so they need to take half a year off from everything. It happens. It could happen suddenly anytime. There shouldn't be an aspect of the project that is owned by only one person. And I know that open source projects, they come to conferences, they host sprints and help new contributors contribute to the project. I think it's great. I would also recommend doing an annual sprint for the maintainers and for the experienced contributors. For example, in Python, we have an annual core developer sprint where we would have 1 week to focus on implementation and discussions and less about mentoring someone new. It's been very valuable to us. We do it once a year for the past several years now. I think you should try it for your project. Just maybe take a few days off from work and hack on your project. And most of the maintainers that I know, they do this for free. Still, having funding for your project would be great. Maybe you need money for infrastructure for your project, like maybe you need private GitHub repo, web hosting. Maybe you need a better laptop. You need to host a sprint, or you want to take a week off so you can focus on your project. Money makes all of those things happen, and money is a great reward for your contributions to open source. Your work provides value to people. So there are lots of programs out there to help fund your open source project. Look into GitHub sponsors program, Tidelift, or Patreon. And above all, take care of yourself. Your project is important, but no more important than your own health and well-being. Remember what your priorities are. Take time off when you need it. And don't feel guilty about it. If you have written maintenance guide, you have succession plan in place, I'm sure you'll feel at ease leaving your project to your co-maintainers while you take the time to recharge. So thank you so much for listening to my talk. If you like to get in touch with me, you can find me on Twitter as Mariatta. And if you found value in my open source contributions and you want to support me, please consider sponsoring me on GitHub. Thank you.